What happens when an artificial intelligence built for logic is asked to judge one of the most influential books in human history? When Elon Musk's Grok AI was reportedly prompted to find contradictions in the Bible,
Musk's XAI,
Grok AI,
Grok AI,
Grok AI,
Elon Musk's AI chatbot.
many expected a clean, decisive takedown. After all, this was a machine designed to analyze data without emotion, belief, or tradition. If contradictions were there, surely AI would expose them. But that is not what happened. Instead of dismantling scripture, Grok delivered a response that unsettled both skeptics and believers. One that refused easy conclusions and challenged modern assumptions about truth, logic, and interpretation. Why didn't the AI declare the Bible flawed? What did it recognize that many human critics overlook? When news spread that Grok AI, created by XAI, had been asked to identify contradictions in the Bible, most people believed they already knew how the story would end. The assumption felt almost automatic. An advanced artificial intelligence built to process logic and data without emotion, tradition, or belief was finally being used to examine one of the most contested books in human history. To many observers, this sounded like the ultimate test. If contradictions existed, a machine would find them. If the Bible were flawed, AI would say so plainly. In that sense, the question was never neutral. It was loaded with expectation. For years, critics have framed the Bible as an ancient document that survives only because people refuse to examine it closely. In that narrative, faith depends on ignorance, and belief collapses once modern tools are applied. Grok was expected to validate that narrative, not because of what it knew, but because of what people wanted it to confirm. Yet from the beginning, Grok approached the task differently. Rather than treating the Bible as a single, uniform text, the AI reportedly recognized it as a collection of writings produced over many centuries. Different authors, different audiences, different historical pressures. Instead of flattening those differences into errors, it acknowledged them as part of the text structure. This distinction mattered. Grok did not immediately label variations in detail or perspective as contradictions. It recognized that ancient writers were not trying to meet modern standards of precision. They were preserving memory, telling stories, recording encounters, and wrestling openly with meaning. Differences in wording or emphasis were not necessarily signs of failure. They were evidence of multiple viewpoints engaging the same reality. What the AI identified was not chaos, but tension. Tension between accounts written for different communities. Tension between history and theology. Tension between human limitation and moral vision. And that realization disrupted the original assumption behind the question. A contradiction only exists if everyone agrees on the rules being applied. Grok implicitly acknowledged that judging an ancient religious text by modern logical expectations can create problems that were never there to begin with. The moment felt unsettling because the AI refused to play its expected role. It did not attack scripture. It did not defend belief. It did something far more uncomfortable. It slowed the conversation down and exposed how confidently people had already decided the outcome. And in that pause, the certainty of the critics began to look far less solid than they expected. After reframing the question, Grok moved to something far more important than listing problems. It defined its terms. Instead of assuming that every difference in wording, sequence, or detail qualified as a contradiction, the AI reportedly separated claims into categories. This step alone changed the entire conversation because it forced a distinction many debates skip entirely. First, Grok identified translation-related differences. The Bible exists in multiple ancient languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and most readers encounter it through layers of translation. The AI noted that many alleged contradictions emerged not from the original text, but from how words were rendered centuries later. A term translated one way in one passage may appear differently elsewhere, creating the illusion of conflict where none existed in the source language. Second, it addressed differences in perspective. Grok treated the biblical authors as witnesses rather than stenographers. When multiple accounts describe the same event, variation is not unexpected. In fact, the AI recognized this as normal human reporting. Two people can describe the same moment truthfully while emphasizing different details. Variation in this sense does not cancel truth. It reflects viewpoint. Third, Grok acknowledged historical and cultural distance. Ancient writers operated within assumptions their original audiences understood instinctively. Modern readers, separated by thousands of years, often import expectations that were never intended. The AI flagged this gap as a major source of confusion, noting that misunderstanding context can easily be mistaken for contradiction. But the most striking category was the last one. Grok distinguished between logical contradiction and theological tension. A logical contradiction occurs when two statements cannot both be true under the same conditions. Theological tension, by contrast, reflects unresolved questions: justice and mercy, judgment and forgiveness, divine sovereignty, and human freedom. The AI reportedly recognized that the Bible does not always resolve these tensions neatly because it was never designed to function as a closed philosophical system. This point unsettled many listeners. Critics often assume that tension equals failure. Grok did not. It treated tension as intentional, part of how the text engages real human experience. Rather than forcing artificial consistency, the Bible allows difficult questions to remain open, sometimes even side by side. What made this moment powerful was not that the AI defended Scripture, but that it refused to oversimplify it. It did not claim the Bible was beyond criticism. It did not claim every passage was easy to reconcile. It simply refused to collapse complexity into error. And in doing so, Grok exposed something subtle but revealing. Many accusations of contradiction are less about the text itself and more about impatience with ambiguity. The AI was not impressed by confident conclusions reached too quickly. It treated understanding as something earned, not assumed. That restraint, coming from a machine, left many people more unsettled than any attack ever could. As Grok's response circulated, something unexpected began to happen. The focus quietly shifted away from the Bible and onto the people who had asked the question in the first place. For years, artificial intelligence has been framed as the ultimate neutral judge, a tool free from emotion, belief, tradition, or bias. Many assume that if AI examined Scripture, it would finally deliver an objective verdict that humans could not. In that sense, Grok was never just being asked to analyze a text. It was being asked to settle a cultural argument. But Grok did not do that. Instead, its response exposed how deeply people project their own expectations onto technology. Skeptics expected the AI to dismantle the Bible because they already believed it should fall apart. Believers, meanwhile, were surprised not because the Bible survived scrutiny, but because a machine refused to play the role of either attacker or defender. What unsettled both sides was the same thing: restraint. Grok did not declare Scripture true or false. It did not claim authority over belief. It acknowledged limits: limits of data, limits of interpretation, limits of what logic alone can resolve. In doing so, it challenged the modern assumption that intelligence automatically produces certainty. This moment revealed something uncomfortable. Many people do not want understanding. They want confirmation. AI is often treated as a weapon to validate conclusions already reached, not as a tool for careful examination. When Grok declined to offer that validation, it disrupted the narrative that machines exist to replace human judgment. There was also a deeper irony at play. A machine designed without faith demonstrated intellectual humility. It recognized that ancient texts cannot be reduced to simple checklists of consistency without distorting their purpose. It treated meaning as layered, not mechanical. And in doing so, it behaved in a way many humans no longer do. It slowed down. The real silence came not because the Bible was defended, but because the usual arguments failed to land. The AI did not reinforce cynicism. It did not fuel debate. It simply refused to oversimplify something complex. And that left a lingering question in the air. If a machine can acknowledge the limits of its own certainty, why do humans so often refuse to do the same? The reaction to Grok's response revealed more than disappointment. It exposed a deeper desire that has shaped modern discussions about the Bible for decades. The desire to find contradictions, not simply to understand the text, but to close the conversation entirely. For many critics, contradictions serve a specific purpose. If enough can be found, the Bible can be dismissed without further engagement. The text no longer needs to be read carefully, wrestled with, or taken seriously. It becomes a problem that has already been solved. Grok quietly resisted that shortcut. Modern readers often approach ancient texts with expectations shaped by textbooks, legal documents, and scientific reports. Consistency is measured line by line. Precision is expected across centuries. But the Bible did not emerge from that world. It came from oral cultures, lived experience, and communities that valued meaning over technical uniformity. When people demand modern standards from ancient writing, tension becomes evidence of failure rather than an invitation to think. Grok's response challenged that impulse by treating contradiction as something that must be demonstrated, not assumed. There is also an emotional layer to this desire. Contradictions offer relief. They provide distance. If a text is flawed, it no longer has the right to question us. Moral discomfort disappears when authority collapses. In that sense, finding contradictions is not always an intellectual exercise. It is a protective one. What Grok's answer disrupted was not belief, but control. By refusing to declare the Bible broken, the AI forced critics to remain in dialogue. The text could not be dismissed so easily. Questions had to remain open. Engagement was still required. This is why the response felt frustrating to some observers. It denied closure. The Bible, as Grok implicitly recognized, is not a puzzle designed to be solved and discarded. It is a conversation that has lasted centuries precisely because it resists simple resolution. It confronts readers with difficult themes: suffering, responsibility, justice, mercy, without always offering comfortable conclusions. Grok did not argue that the Bible was immune to critique. It simply refused to reduce complexity into contradiction for the sake of convenience. And that refusal revealed something telling. The hunger for contradictions often says more about our discomfort with unresolved questions than about the text itself. After Grok delivered its response, something unusual happened. The conversation did not explode, it stalled. There were no viral lists of contradictions, no triumphant declarations that Scripture had finally been dismantled, no definitive verdict to circulate. Instead, there was a pause, and that pause spoke louder than any argument. The silence existed because Grok refused to choose a side. It did not affirm belief, it did not validate skepticism, it did not escalate the debate. What it offered instead was something far less satisfying to modern discourse: restraint. In online culture, attention is driven by certainty. Strong claims spread faster than careful ones. Grok's response did not fit that pattern. It avoided absolute language. It acknowledged complexity. It emphasized interpretation over judgment. And because of that, it left very little for outrage or celebration to attach itself to. This was deeply unsettling for many observers. People often turn to technology not to explore uncertainty, but to escape it. AI is expected to produce answers that end discussions, not reopen them. When Grok declined to do that, it exposed how dependent modern conversations have become on finality. The silence also revealed a contradiction of its own. Critics often accuse believers of avoiding hard questions. Yet in this moment, it was the refusal of a machine to deliver a simple dismissal that caused discomfort. The hard question was no longer, is the Bible contradictory, but what do we do when the answer isn't clean? Grok's response removed an easy exit. The Bible could not be waved away. Engagement was still required. Thought was still necessary. And that demand for patience, nuance, and intellectual honesty proved more challenging than any list of alleged errors. In a strange way, the AI accomplished what many debates never do. It lowered the temperature. It stripped away performance. It left people alone with unresolved questions. And unresolved questions are uncomfortable. They demand reflection instead of reaction. They require humility instead of certainty. They ask us to think, not just respond. That is why the silence mattered. It wasn't the absence of information. It was the absence of easy answers. When Grok AI was asked to find contradictions in the Bible, many expected a verdict. What they received instead was something far more unsettling: restraint. The AI did not expose Scripture as broken. It did not defend it as flawless. It simply refused to reduce a complex, ancient text into a modern checklist of errors. Along the way, it revealed several uncomfortable truths. Many alleged contradictions arise from translation gaps, perspective differences, and lost context. Others are not logical failures at all, but unresolved tensions the Bible never tried to erase. And perhaps most revealing of all, the hunger to find contradictions. It often says more about our desire for closure than about the text itself. This episode was never about proving faith or defeating skepticism. It exposed how quickly we expect technology to settle questions we no longer want to wrestle with ourselves. A machine acknowledged the limits of logic. It accepted uncertainty. It slowed the conversation down. That leaves us with a question no AI can answer for us. When certainty is no longer guaranteed, do we walk away or do we lean in and engage more honestly? That question remains open. And maybe it always was.